Welcome to Let's Talk Hope, a podcast devoted to organ transplantation, stories, donor families, recipients, living transplant recipients. And my name is Marian Shuck. I am your host. And today I'm here with Alana Carr, my guest who has been on a journey since she was 4 years old, a transplantation journey that has taken her from a child needing a transplant to now a medical student. I'm excited to talk and share her story. Alana, welcome to Let's Talk Hope.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. So I know we have a lot to talk about today. So let's start with your transplant journey, and then we'll talk about all the exciting things that you've done in between.
Yeah. So my transplant story started when I was 2 years old. I got sick when I was actually at gymnastics class as a 2.5-year-old in gymnastics. And I, was having a lot of vomiting. I just was really sick. What ended up happening was I had what's called a midgut volvulus, where my intestines twisted on themselves, and there was a loss of blood. So, that causes the organ to die.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the reason I was becoming more ill. When my parents brought me to the hospital for the first time, the hospital wasn't able to take care of me appropriately. And I ended up going into organ failure and needing to be immediately flown from Chicago to University of Pittsburgh, where they had a transplant team to further take care of it.
So when you say organ failure, so not just your intestines, but additional organs started to fail as well. Tell me about those.
Correct. So kind of not immediately, but through a process. Once my gut had failed, then I was on medication to feed me. That medication 20 years ago was very toxic, almost like chemotherapy. So that did not help my other organs. And my pancreas, my small bowel, and liver ended up having to be transplanted when I was 4 years old.
What was that like for your family? Obviously, you're small. They have this baby, essentially a toddler, who has now faced with this huge medical challenge. What was that like for your parents? And what is it like to be what was it like for them, for you to be a pediatric patient needing to be on a transplant list with so many needs?
Yeah. So in the beginning, organ transplantation wasn't really something exposed to my parents. Something just they've heard of, but not anything they had much information about. So when I was sick, it was really, the process of grief, being in shock, being in denial at times, and just slowly getting to the acceptance portion of that grief process. What helped my family the most was being affiliated with a church. The church was able to have particular groups and even donate money for my cause. That was one thing that really supported my parents. My mom actually, around the time that I had my transplant, a little bit afterwards, ended up having my brother. So then there were two small children with a lot of needs.
So 2 children under 5.
Yes. So there was a lot going on. And then me being in the hospital, and then my mom taking care of the little one and running around the hospital, and just being a child in the medical system.
So what was that like for your parents? Because you're in Pittsburgh and your family is from Chicago. And so how did you all navigate being in Pittsburgh and being in Chicago? What was that like, and what did that do to your family?
Yeah. So what happened, and this is the language that I use, and I know it's probably not common.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened was my mom ended up being my primary parent, taking care of me predominantly in Pittsburgh and dealing with that situation. And my dad became the primary parent of my brother, taking care of him predominantly in Chicago. And then occasionally there was some back and forth where we would see one another, but that was pretty much the position for at least 5-ish, getting towards 10-ish years, the back and the forth, the back and the forth. I ended up being in Pittsburgh less and less as time went by, but they were my primary clinical providers up until I was the age of actually 23.
Okay.
So there was them taking care of me for that extended period of time.
And so what was your life like after you had the transplant? Was this the only transplant you had, this multi-organ transplant?
Yeah.
What was that like for a pediatric child?
Yeah. So when I was 4 years old, I had the small bowel, liver, and pancreas transplant. And then immediately afterwards, I had some complications. A lot of fluid went to my legs, and I ended up having nerve damage there, and many years of physical therapy and kind of going from that. Also, I guess being a child and like as a pediatric patient, there's an emphasis on having fun still, participating with the the participants at the hospital that had games, and there were clowns at times, and we kept trying to feel as lighthearted as possible when in the terrible situation.
And everything was so heavy, especially for a child. I remember being in the hospital. I was 9. It wasn't anything serious, but I had tonsillitis. But I kept getting sick and sick and sick. And so finally they said, she has to have her tonsils out. And so because I have a twin sister, they made her get her tonsils out too. And so she was in the hospital. She was not happy with me because she had to get her tonsils out too. So it is, but we were separated, which is unlikely for twins, but we were sort of separated. So that made it all the worse. I can imagine the heaviness and the heaviness from your family being separated. So you get the transplant. You're doing educational, you're lighthearted, you're having as much fun as you possibly can while excelling in your educational pursuits. So tell me what that was like growing up. Did you have as close to a normal experience from an educational standpoint?
I would say it's pretty close to normal. There was a lot of absence because take care of my medical capabilities. But other than that, I was able to be at school for a long period of time.
Okay, good.
Before kindergarten, when I was so sick, my family didn't really know what the future was going to hold for me. So they had tutors for me, and I ended up excelling and, skipping first grade, going to second. And after that, I went through all of the grades, all through high school and eventually undergrad, college, my master's program, and now medical school. So my education has been fairly standard, with the unique part being managing going to appointments while also needing to be at 2 places at the same time.
So, well, I was going to ask you, what's your health trajectory been since the transplant, and how are you doing now?
Yeah. So, things slowly progressed and getting better and better as time went by. Most of my care was, I would say, really dire in the first 5 years, dealing with the complications with my legs, dealing with complications with infections and things like that transplant patients are more exposed to. But as I got older and was starting to go to school on a regular basis, I just had to focus on my medication, going to my regular routine appointments, doing my physical therapy, medications, things like that. As long as that routine was fulfilled, I was able to be pretty healthy.
Mhm.
I had some issues with anemia. My gut was
Mhm.
bleeding,
Mhm.
and I needed to have a revision done at one point,
Okay.
and I had complications after that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it's kind of just my one issue.
Well, that's
Yeah.
good. And your parents did not sort of take this lying down. They knew they had a sick child, but they sort of championed you and then also became champions for organ and tissue donations along with you. Tell me what it's like to have parents who just uh so vested in you that they decided that, okay, this is something that we have to live with, and how can we make this the best for our family and best for our child
Yeah.
who is handling this situation as gracefully as you have.
Yeah. I think in the beginning, my my family was educated from nursing and medical providers,
Mhm.
what the social services were available to have support. A lot of emotional support in the beginning,
Mhm.
financial support, and otherwise.
Mhm.
So that was a big part of it. And then my parents also, they were able to be supported through the church as well.
Mhm.
They became advocates kind of after that, once they had all the exposure of places like Gift of Hope, Make
Mhm.
a Wish,
Mhm.
different other groups.
Mhm.
Um, they were able to, become passionate and want to become advocates themselves,
Mhm.
help other organ donation recipients and families of donors, and kind of just be a part of the community and
Mhm.
be a positive force for it.
And you've gone pretty full circle in your advocacy as well.
Mhm.
Not only being a medical student, undergrad, social sciences um, track to get you to now, being a medical student. Tell us what that has done for you in terms of your advocacy, because you've not only given back to Gift of Hope, you've also created a foundation and you give back internationally. Tell us what that's like.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was exposed to organ donation advocacy as early as, 5 years
Mhm.
old. So,
Mhm.
my mom would take me to certain things with me, particularly the Gift of Hope. We were
Mhm.
very involved. And that made me, appreciate what advocacy has to offer.
Mhm.
So, about 2 years ago, I developed my foundation called CarrCARE Charity,
Mhm.
and we have a couple of different arms of what we focus on, but there is organ donation education and other public health causes. There is also how we provide medical resources internationally. One of the facilities is called CareMax Center in Nigeria,
Mhm.
and we just donated them otoscopes or
Mhm.
devices to listen to the ears
Mhm.
and all different kinds of things. Um, so there's that. And then we also do work in disenfranchised neighborhoods.
Mhm.
We renovate properties, particularly to address social determinants of health, environmental issues.
Mhm.
Um, and those are kind of what we really focus on, and it touches
Mhm.
a kind of holistic approach of how to approach public health and um, uh, bolstering against
Mhm.
misinformation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important, and people think that, or sometimes feel, I don't want to overgeneralize, but sometimes people are in a place where they can only think about themselves and the situation that they're in. So it's very admirable that you've taken the time at this young age to really think about, okay, my situation was this, and now other people have these types of situations and needs, and to be able to create a foundation that really can go in and support,
Yeah.
and you want to do everything right. My cause is homelessness.
Hmm.
I believe if we have a home for every car, we should have a home for every person. And so if people's cars are in a garage, that's a home for them. And so why don't we have enough homes for people? So that's important to be able to give back. And that's one of the things about Gift of Hope. Although we do focus on organ and tissue transplantation, it's important that we give back to the communities that we serve as well. So that's great work you're doing. But not only are you doing that, but I understand you're an author.
Yeah.
Tell me about
So
that.
as a part of that public education piece, we feel it's very important to use storytelling to educate on, chronic illness and what it's like to live like that. So I developed a memoir, sharing my story, and it's really a self-help book. There, after each chapter, there's some reflective questions to go through to kind of use a mental process of how you feel about your personal health when you're reading, and how you would address some of the issues if you were a medical provider and whatnot. And it's really, the goal is to have exposure on kind of both sides, the patient side and the provider side, what that looks like.
And also, it also seems like it's self-advocacy, right?
Yeah.
How do you help people understand how to advocate for themselves? Why would you say that it's so important that people understand how to advocate for themselves? We talked about social determinants of health earlier, but also as they navigate health challenges, what are some of the things that people should be aware of?
Yeah. So like I had mentioned at the beginning, when my parents had first taken me to the hospital, they weren't able to appropriately take care of me. And there's a lot of different evidence-based issues of why that happens. Racial discrimination, one of them, other aspects of social determinants of health, financial issues and things like that. So there are a lot of boundaries in place, and what's important is when you're in the position of being a patient, you want to be able to self-advocate for yourself, be able to speak your choices, have that education on organ donation, and using that in your conversations if applicable. Trying to have as much exposure to true evidence-based medicine, and applying where that's applicable, and just being aware of your current health status, and communicating with different types of providers, whether it's your physician or nursing or what have you.
So as a future healthcare provider, physician, what is your hope to be? What type of physician are you hoping to be?
Yeah. So I'm applying this year for the 2027 cycle of residency. I'm applying for family medicine, which is they focus on supporting families through all aspects of life. They take care of, pregnant patients, children, elderly, everything from in between. And they also focus on continuity of care and addressing some of those social determinants of health, and how they can keep primary care important, keep all the aspects connected. And that's what I want to provide for my patients, by not just treating them one day, but piecing all the pieces together and providing a holistic approach.
Yeah, that's important. We have a family friend, Dr. Paul Crawford, who is a nephrologist. And, he said one of the most painful things in his practice was seeing his patients have end-stage renal disease, and then seeing their children and their children have end-stage renal disease, because there was no practical education or information given to them to help, especially communities of color, who we struggle with chronic health diseases, hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol, and things of that nature. And then you couple that with lifestyle and diet. And so sometimes they're at odds with your health. And so as a family medicine practitioner, you'll be able to, see that, as you said, the continuum, but also how do you suggest future practitioners handle families who may have or see certain chronic diseases, and the families may not want to go to the doctor, right?
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I have a brother, 20 years, and been to the doctor in stage renal disease.
Yeah.
Even though our youngest sister is a nurse, even though I'm in healthcare, and organ and tissue donation, those are things that, uh, he was well aware of, but yet still had a hesitancy with going to the doctor. How do we
Yeah.
prevent that?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is rooted in fear.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of fear comes from misinformation or a
Mhm.
lack of understanding.
Mhm.
So, like, I've been focusing on, my big piece is having education for that. A lot with the modern world and social media and things, a lot of physicians and providers are providing, public health education through Facebook, Instagram, what have you. So that is great. There's also, community organizations, nonprofits, and other foundations that provide that education and also support. So I think that's really important. And then just encouraging people to have conversations at home, whether it's about hypertension, diabetes, how can we change our diet? How can we increase our fitness? How can we make sure we are taking our medication every day? Some people forget medicine. Just having conversations about that and try to address that fear, and that will help people be able to understand their position and be more comfortable in seeking out care.
How would you help people understand to advocate for registering to be an organ and tissue donor?
Yeah.
In your situation, at 4 years old, your donor was a deceased donor. And so, that's not something you could fathom back there then as a 4-year-old. But as you've grown older, how would you have people advocate, especially when we have so many children on the waiting list?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't think about organ donation for pediatrics. A lot of people don't think of this. It's something thought about in geriatrics and elderly care and end of life. For children in particular, it's important to have those conversations as parents, even if it comes up and your child is now in that position, getting that education that you need, having resources be able to support you. How I felt in my personal experience connected to, our deceased donor is a lot of appreciation for that. And that's helped me, find peace in my own daily life.
Particularly as, you've grown up to be a very accomplished young woman. And so, your organ donor was remarkable in that vein. But then to see you here now as this accomplished, remarkable woman, what would you say is the best part of your life now?
Oh, wow. What a question. Um, I guess really my development over time and how I've been able to be creative and, you know, enjoy my education. I was in marching band. I was in Rose Bowl parade. I've studied
When did you go to
abroad.
the Rose Bowl parade?
In 2011.
Oh, okay. I went in 2015.
So nice. 2011. I was there. Yeah. I also did the Macy's Day Parade as
Okay.
well. Yeah. So I just had a lot of enjoyable aspects of my life. I never let illness keep me from doing anything. And I was provided a lot of support in doing that. So that's what I'm appreciative of.
As we approach the third annual Gift of Hope Walk Run in September, what does it mean to you to be able to walk and support the Gift of Hope Community Foundation?
Yeah. So CarrCARE Charity is actually going to be there. We're going to support. We were there last year too, and the walk is, an embodiment of courage, really. You know, you're taking that literally first steps. You're taking those steps to show that you have action in your advocacy, not just talking about it, but showing up, spreading awareness when you can. And then it's not just also about the physical walk and who shows up, but that exposure afterwards of who sees, you know, what was happening and what that community was able to achieve.
Yeah, I walk. You and I talked a little bit earlier about my story. So I walk and I have a team in honor of my husband. So it's just cool to see the different teams and everybody that comes out. So we're looking for, over 1,200 people this year from, 600, 700 to 1,000 last year, and now hopefully over 1,200. So as we talk about things that are in the community and we talk about advocacy, what is the one thing or two things that you want people to know, one, about your journey, and then two, about what they should do to have a life, even though you have an illness and a serious illness, what you should do about being the best you can be every day?
Yeah. I think when I was young, I liked to journal a lot. I like to get my feelings out, express myself. I wasn't a big person about sharing my feelings, but I wanted to be reflective in a more intimate and private way. I've continued that as I've gotten older, and I think that's one tool that other people can use and really help. Um, One thing that I guess I want people to take away from my journey is you don't have to have anything stop you. You can keep pursuing on. And when you have that fun and when you have that support and creativity, you know, the challenges become less difficult.
Alana, it has been so lovely to talk to you today. Thank you so much for just coming and sharing this experience that is a different type of experience for our audience, but one that we really need spotlight on. And so I thank you for being here today.
Thank you as well. I'm glad to be here.